what if you could run a full clinical trial without a single human patient and still get results that could lead to the next life-saving cure? Sounds a bit like science fiction, right? Well, a brand new study suggests this future is closer than you might think. Today, we're going to dig into how these virtual patients could solve one of the biggest logjams in medicine. So, what's really holding back the next wave of medical breakthroughs? You might be surprised. The answer is a conflict, a real tension right at the very heart of all medical research. Okay, so check this out. On one side, you've got researchers who need to sift through mountains of data from past clinical trials to find new cures. It's a treasure trove. But on the other side, you have patient privacy, which is and should be completely non-negotiable. This creates this massive bottleneck. The very data that could save lives is locked up tight. So how do you break that stalemate? All right, so here's how we're going to break it down in this explainer. We'll start with medicine's great data dilemma. Then we'll look at this cool idea of a virtual patient solution. We'll see how they put these avatars to the test, and then get into the really interesting part, this trade-off between privacy and utility. And finally, we'll wrap up with what this all means for the future of medicine. Okay, let's jump right in. Part 1, the data dilemma. So, clinical trial data, right? It's the absolute gold standard for developing new drugs. But you've got these huge privacy laws like GDPR and HIPAA that lock it down. And you might think, hey, just remove the names, problem solved. But it's way more complicated than that. The study points out that unique combinations of data points. Think about it. A specific age, a rare side effect, a particular test result, all of that together can act like a digital fingerprint. This risk of re-identification is so real that it basically creates a stalemate for researchers. So this leads to a pretty wild what-if question. What if we could perfectly replicate all that patient data without using any real patients at all? What if you could just build a virtual trial from scratch? And that's the core idea behind synthetic data. It's pretty amazing. You have an AI model that basically studies a real confidential data set. It learns its statistical DNA. I mean, every pattern, every relationship, every weird outlier. And then from that understanding, it generates a brand new set of virtual patients. These aren't copies. They're statistically identical to the real group, but they contain zero information from any real individual. It's like building the world's most perfect flight simulator for a clinical trial. You can run all the tests you want without ever touching the priceless real data. And the process is actually pretty straightforward. Step 1, the AI analyzes the real data. Step 2, it builds a model of all the relationships between the variables, the nuts and bolts. And step 3, it generates brand new, totally artificial virtual patients. Again, this isn't just copy and pasting. It's a complete recreation built from a deep statistical understanding of the original. Okay, that all sounds great in theory, but does it actually work in the real world? Well, researchers decided to put this whole idea through a super rigorous test using data from 2 huge clinical trials. And they didn't mess around. They went straight to the big leagues. 2 massive real-world phase 3 trials for multiple sclerosis, one from Merck and another from Biogen. We're talking about incredibly complex data from more than 2,000 patients. This stuff represents years of research and millions of dollars. So the stakes were super high. Could the virtual data actually replicate the results of these gold standard trials? This was the big test. The virtual data had to clear 2 massive hurdles at the same time. 1, it had to be completely, provably anonymous to protect every single patient. And 2, and this is the kicker, it had to be scientifically accurate. Meaning, if you ran the same analysis on the virtual data, you had to get the exact same scientific conclusions as the original multi-million-dollar trial. So, did it work? Could the data be both private and useful? Well, the results were pretty darn impressive. The answer? A huge yes. In the advanced trial, over 80% of the synthetic data sets they generated successfully replicated the primary scientific outcome of the original study. Let me put that more simply. If the real, expensive trial showed that a drug worked, the virtual trial also showed the drug worked. The scientific utility was there. It was proven. These virtual patients behaved just like the real ones. Okay, so what about privacy? The results there were just as strong. They used a metric called the hidden rate, which is basically a way of measuring how well protected the data is from a hacker trying to identify a real person. And they got rates of 85% and over 93%. That shows a really robust level of privacy protection. But here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers found something kind of counterintuitive.
Making the synthetic data a perfect one-to-one statistical mirror of the original, what they call high fidelity, didn't automatically make it more useful for answering scientific questions. And this revealed a really critical trade-off. It's all a balancing act. You can think of it like a sound mixing board with a bunch of dials. You can turn up the privacy dial by smoothing out the really unique outlier data points. Those are the ones that are easiest to trace back to an individual. Or you can turn up the utility dial, making sure even the rarest events are perfectly represented so your science is super precise. The real genius here is that you can tune these settings to find the perfect balance for whatever specific question you're trying to answer. So, what does all this mean for the future? Well, this is the why it matters moment, and the implications are just staggering. For the life sciences world, the impact is enormous. This could unlock decades of trapped data, letting researchers from all over the world test new ideas safely. It could absolutely accelerate the pace of research, help design better trials in the future, and really usher in a new era of open science. In fact, the study's authors put their money where their mouth is. They publicly released their virtual placebo data for anyone to use, proving it can be done. And that leaves us with a final, really powerful question. Are we about to enter an age where armies of virtual patients can test new theories at a scale and speed we've never even dreamed of? It's entirely possible that the next great medical breakthrough won't be found in a lab, but by an algorithm, analyzing a patient who never even existed.